How did Mao Zedong's rule shape the China we know today? To answer this, we must first explore the beginning of his rule in 1949. In the aftermath of a brutal and protracted civil war, a new era dawned in China. Emerging from this period of turmoil was a figure who would forever change the course of Chinese history, Mao Zedong. The charismatic leader, with his compelling vision of a new socialist China, seized control of the nation, establishing the People's Republic of China in 1949. But what led to his meteoric rise to power? The answer lies in the political climate of the time. China, post-World War II, was a nation on the brink. Rampant corruption, economic instability, and social unrest were rife, creating a fertile ground for revolutionary ideologies. Enter Mao Zedong, a man with a vision for a new China. A China that would be free from foreign influence, a China where the vast peasant population would be the driving force of the nation. His ideology, a unique blend of Marxism and Leninism, struck a chord with the masses. His promise of land reforms and social equality resonated deeply with the poverty-stricken peasants, who formed the majority of the population. By expertly harnessing this discontent and channeling it into a powerful revolutionary force, Mao managed to overthrow the ruling Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, and ascend to the pinnacle of power in China. His charisma and populist policies garnered him widespread support among the Chinese populace, laying the foundation for his rule. But Mao's vision for China was not without its challenges. His path to power was fraught with obstacles, and his rule would be marked by periods of intense upheaval and drastic policy changes. Still, his influence was undeniable, and his legacy continues to shape the China we know today. With this background, we can now delve deeper into Mao's rule and its impact on China. In 1958, Mao launched a campaign known as the Great Leap Forward, which aimed to boost China's economy. This was Mao's ambitious plan to transform China from an agrarian society into a modern, industrialized nation, all within the span of only 5 years. At the heart of the Great Leap Forward were two key strategies: the establishment of communes and an aggressive drive for industrialization. The concept of communes was based on shared resources and collective farming. Families were grouped together in communes of thousands of people where they worked, ate, and lived collectively. The idea was to increase agricultural productivity by leveraging the power of the collective. Parallel to this, there was a push for rapid industrialization. Small-scale industries were set up in rural areas, and people were encouraged to set up backyard steel furnaces. The aim was to boost steel production and, by extension, accelerate the pace of industrial growth. The initial optimism was palpable. The government painted a picture of a prosperous future where China would surpass the West in terms of industrial output. But this optimism was short-lived. The Great Leap Forward was a campaign built on flawed strategies and unrealistic targets. The communes failed to increase agricultural productivity. Instead, they disrupted traditional farming practices, leading to a decline in food production. The push for industrialization, too, was a failure. The backyard furnaces produced low-quality steel, and valuable resources were wasted. The end result was an economic collapse. The failure of the Great Leap Forward led to a severe food shortage. This, combined with poor weather conditions and a lack of accurate reporting due to fear of punishment, led to what is now known as the Great Chinese Famine. The Great Leap Forward, despite its optimistic beginnings, led to one of the largest famines in human history. It's a stark reminder of how grand plans can go awry when they are not rooted in realistic strategies and sustainable practices. The Chinese famine, which lasted from 1959 to 1961, was a direct result of the Great Leap Forward. Known as the largest famine in human history, it claimed the lives of an estimated 55 million people. The severity of this famine was unparalleled, with its impacts reaching deep into the lives of the Chinese population and the country's economy. The root cause of this catastrophe was a combination of political decisions and environmental conditions. The Great Leap Forward, an economic and social campaign led by Mao, aimed to transform China into a society capable of competing with the West. However, the aggressive measures taken, such as forced labor and the rapid collectivization of agriculture, led to a decline in food production. This, coupled with unfavorable weather conditions, resulted in a catastrophic food shortage. The Chinese population was hit hard. People from all walks of life, from the rural peasants to the urban working class, were affected. The economy, too, faced a severe blow. Food production plummeted, industrial output fell, and China's GDP experienced a significant decline. Mao and the Chinese government's response to the famine was a mixture of denial, repression, and eventual policy change. Initially, the government denied the existence of a famine and repressed those who tried to expose it. It was not until the severity of the crisis was undeniable that Mao was forced to change his policies. This event led to a significant shift in policy. The government started to move away from the aggressive collectivization of agriculture and began to implement more moderate policies. Private farming was reintroduced, and peasants were allowed to sell their surplus produce. These changes marked the beginning of a period of economic reform that would ultimately transform China into the global economic power it is today. The Chinese famine was a turning point in Mao's rule, leading to a re-evaluation of his policies. It served as a harsh lesson about the dangers of rapid and forced industrialization without considering the potential consequences. This event has left an indelible mark on China's history, shaping its political, economic, and social landscape in profound ways. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution to reassert his control over the Chinese government and society. This was no ordinary political maneuver. Mao's Cultural Revolution was a campaign of epic proportions, aimed at reshaping the very fabric of Chinese society. Mao's strategy was twofold. First, he mobilized the youth, forming them into paramilitary units known as the Red Guards. These enthusiastic young revolutionaries were the foot soldiers of Mao's cultural upheaval. They were tasked with purging society of what Mao dubbed counter-revolutionaries, individuals whose ideas or actions were perceived as threats to Mao's vision for China. Second, Mao sought to purge the Communist Party itself. He believed that the party had become infested with bourgeois and capitalist elements that needed to be rooted out. This purge was brutal and relentless, reaching into every corner of the party's structure. The Cultural Revolution was a period of intense chaos and violence. Schools were closed down, intellectuals were publicly humiliated, ancient artifacts and buildings were destroyed, and millions of people were persecuted. This was a time when neighbor turned against neighbor, and even family members denounced each other in the fervor of the revolution. The turmoil and violence of the Cultural Revolution had a profound effect on Chinese society and culture. It created a climate of fear and suspicion that lingers to this day. Many of the country's intellectuals and artists were silenced or driven into exile, leading to a brain drain that China is still recovering from. The Cultural Revolution also changed the face of the Chinese government. The purges within the Communist Party led to a consolidation of power around Mao and his closest allies, a shift that would have lasting implications for the governance and political culture of China. Despite the devastation it wrought, the Cultural Revolution did succeed in one respect. It reaffirmed Mao's control over China, at least for a time. The Cultural Revolution, like the Great Leap Forward, had profound and lasting impacts on China. Mao Zedong's rule ended with his death in 1976, but his influence on China continues to this day. The political, economic, and social landscapes of the country were forever altered during his reign, and the ripple effects of his decisions are still felt to this day. Politically, Mao's approach to governance was a stark departure from China's past. His championing of a one-party system under the Communist Party continues to be the defining structure of China's government. His rule also established a culture of personality cults that persists in Chinese politics, with leaders often portrayed as infallible figures to be revered. Economically, the changes were drastic. Mao's Great Leap Forward aimed to transform China from an agrarian society into an industrial powerhouse. While the immediate results were devastating, leading to the largest famine in human history, the long-term effects are more complex. Following Mao's death, China did eventually become an industrial powerhouse, though through economic reforms that were a significant departure from Mao's policies. On the social front, Mao's Cultural Revolution had far-reaching consequences. His attempt to purge capitalist and traditional elements from society led to the uprooting of much of China's cultural heritage. However, it also led to a level of social mobility unseen before, as traditional hierarchies were disrupted. Yet, Mao's legacy is not black and white. There's an ongoing debate about his impact. Some see him as a revolutionary hero who freed China from the shackles of imperialism and feudalism. Others view him as a dictator whose policies led to the deaths of millions and caused immense suffering. Despite the differing views, one thing is clear: Mao Zedong was a pivotal figure in shaping modern China. His influence transcends his lifetime and continues to permeate every aspect of Chinese society. Mao Zedong's rule was a period of profound change for China, the effects of which can still be seen today. Whether for good or ill, his impact is undeniable.